Welcome back, Sleepyheads, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sleepy Aliens Perspective. I'm your host, Ashley, and I want to talk about some of the key takeaways that I got from attending some of day one of Washington, D.C.'s AI Expo. Now, I've only lived in D.C. for not even a full year. Even though I was born here, I never grew up here. Aside from me really enjoying the city, I love the free conventions and different events that DC has. Just from the time that I was there, I quickly realized that this expo is completely biased. And I mean that in the sense that everyone in attendance, all the companies, their main concern, their main alignment is with pushing and utilizing AI, whether it's in STEM fields or business or the public or private sector. I was expecting at least a couple of the speakers to be addressing concerns when it comes to AI, but that was not the case at all. So all over the expo, companies were discussing and marketing their use of AI and how it's helping push their business forward. There were drones, there were some Tesla cars, and I assume we're like the next series of Tesla cars. Different military branches were there doing demonstrations, a lot of that mainly concerned with drones and just how they're going to be utilizing AI as well. And on top of that, there were burrito bowls that cost about $18 and simply not enough freebies. And I'm serious, most of these companies were not giving away any good freebies. There was pens and some tote bags, but you really had to talk to them to actually get that stuff. So I didn't get any freebies. I did one thing that I felt really weird about, which was you let this AI take a picture of your face, they scan it, and then this AI will actually draw out a sketch of your face. And I want to say, I will show you what mine looks like a little bit towards the end of the video, but it's not good. It wasn't good. I didn't like it. So I did watch some of the open discussions, and here's what I think you should know. And this first one I think is the most important one, and the other ones concern the military, but we'll get into that as well. So the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Labor, Keith Sonderling, sat down with Keith Stryer, who is an AI expert, and he's advised companies in both the public and private sector. He used to work for President Biden, and he now works for AMD, which is Advanced Micro Devices, a huge company doing a lot with AI. But their main discussion concerned AI in the American workforce. Now, I hopped in on this discussion probably about 10 minutes late, but at first I had no idea that the guy who was speaking so positively about AI in the American workforce was actually the Deputy Secretary of Labor, Keith Sonderling. And Keith Sonderling is more excited about the use of AI in the public sector. He's expressed that it's here and the American workforce needs to prepare and basically get on board. So Keith Stryer, the AI expert, he asked about how to help those who are in fear of losing their jobs. The American workforce, he was already seeing those changes with layoffs and companies already incorporating AI more and more every day into their businesses. And Sonderling said Americans need to become AI literate so they don't get left behind in the workforce, and that there will be jobs for AI maintenance, and he hopes that more people will utilize AI to start businesses. And in addition to AI, he says that people need to be able to code as well. So having that coding and AI literacy is essential, and it's already been incorporated into K through 12 education in schools right now. And Sonderling compared the AI revolution to computers in the 80s and 90s, when adults had to go to night school to learn about computers and how to use those in the workplace, while kids at that time, such as myself in the 90s, were already learning about computers in school for free. And it wasn't this big adjustment that needed to be made. In the sense, think about when people were getting rid of typewriters completely, and in addition to that, transition to computers. So there was less of this gray area for children to adapt to those changes. It's more natural, whereas, someone who didn't grow up with those things, there's a lot of acceptance, there's a lot of technology that needs to be understood in that process. And the fact that in that period, I remember, adults taking computer classes. I remember seeing commercials for those things. I remember seeing different books about how to use computers and libraries. It's kind of crazy now to see history repeating itself in that way. Because personal computers did come out in 1973, but they became more accessible to the average household and business in the 80s and 90s. And what's funny is that a couple years ago, I actually saw that a public library in Tampa, I was staying with my aunt for like a short period of time, but they were offering coding classes at this library for free for ages 8 through 18. And I think they even have like an adult coding class. But this was a couple of years ago. So this whole transition has already been happening quietly, but now it's becoming a necessity. And I think more and more people are going to have to adapt to that, take these classes. And just like Sonderling says, you're either going to get left behind if you don't have some understanding of how these things work. And Sonderling mentioned Finland. I didn't know this, but Finland has really upped the AI literacy within its workforce and citizens. And they're having a better transition when it comes to that. And I have to look into Finland more, but it seems like the country itself is really, it's almost like China, where they are really incorporating more AI into everyday life and how that's slowly becoming a normal everyday thing, which is very interesting. But it's just crazy how history is really repeating itself here. And I didn't really think about in my head what's the technology transition going to be like for me? Because I remember the period where we had no cell phones, and now cell phones are everywhere. And I didn't have my first cell phone until my senior year of high school. And I think I had one before, but it was like $15 worth of texting in minutes on there. I never consistently paid for my cell phone. I always had prepaid phones. And even like my first 2 or 3 years in college, I hardly ever had like a fully functioning cell phone. I would always go a certain amount of months without paying for it just because, I was in college. I didn't make a lot of money. And honestly, who was I texting? It was never, even now, I'm like, I don't even text that much. I don't actually like it. And it's something that I never really got on board with. Yeah, I don't want to get too sidetracked. But I think the most disturbing aspect of Sonderling and Streyer's discussion was the general blind optimism that, yeah, the American workforce is going to get on board with this. It's going to bring so many positive changes to people's livelihoods and business capabilities. I mean, the fact that, Sonderling really believes that so many people will develop that AI literacy and then go off and start a business, when not everybody has that mindset and capability to start a business. I'm not saying they're not capable, but there's people who like working for somebody, and there's people who, take that initiative and actually start that business. There's always been, this division of those groups. And to have him think that, oh no, suddenly everyone's gonna, develop that entrepreneurship and, want to find some way to make money through AI, when really it's going to be the fact that people do not have a choice. They're going to have to develop multiple streams of income, and they're going to have to use AI. And so now we have this financial dependence that's going to be tied to AI. And I think that's pretty scary. The fact that that's just already going to be evident in our society. And I want to say too, not everybody is meant to, not everybody's good with math and coding and computers. Like, that's not something that's natural to everybody. There's more people that are better at, working with their hands, working in gardens, with words, with physical education. There's so many various types of intelligence out there, and not everybody has that natural gusto to do coding, tech, cybersecurity, all of these different fields that are being pushed more and more onto people, I think. But yeah, that blind optimism is just, I think that's the only way you can sell something like this, so I get it. But I just thought that was just ridiculous. And because, the amount of social change that AI will bring, it will cause some destruction in that process as well. And I think we all have to admit that to ourselves. So different military branches did speak at the expo, and I'll play some of the clips. You'll have to excuse the extra noise in the background. There were some military drone demo stations that got pretty loud at certain moments, and I don't really feel like paying for another Adobe subscription because it's already annoying that we have to pay month to month, when back in the day you bought a program or software, you owned it, and you purchased newer versions when you wanted to get those newer versions. So clearly I'm not going to be adapting to the AI literacy and all the coding. Gosh, the capital system is just getting out of hand at this point. But here are some clips that I think are worthy. And again, please excuse the extra noise. And once you watch, we'll come right back to it.
That has been prepared on the security environment, but also on the operational requirements and the capabilities of the future. And so I feel like last year when you spoke, you were still transitioning the Air Force. But it feels like this year there's so many good news stories about, the new family of aircrafts. You have both uncrewed and crewed. The numbers of recruitments are really, really positive. And then, you have really embraced human machine teaming. So I want to cover all of these topics with you.
The resilient data with the speed and the latency to help decision makers do that sensing, making sense, and acting at the speed that can be faster than our adversaries. That's why I have confidence that these systems are designed to ingest that, to work in the same data architecture with the same specifications. And if industry wants to come and play and add advancements to those, all they need to know is that here's the architecture you need to be compliant with, and you can come on in and play. So I think it offers a lot of opportunity for accelerating our upgrades in the future.
When you were here last year, we talked about AI adoption in the Air Force. And since then, we have the AI-enabled F-16 now. How do you view the current AI adoption within the force?
I think right now it's a mixed bag. I think it's not for lack of effort, but I think there's some institutional pieces there. So we've got some great, really excellent areas in the MIT Accelerator, AI Accelerator. We've got the AI Studio from Stanford. We've got Test Pilot School is now integrating more AI. So we are understanding the value of it. Assimilating it into our institution is one I think we still have some work to do on to go faster. We see the value of it in things like data fusion and helping make strategic decisions along those lines. I think as we're developing the 2CCA along with the autonomous platform, we're doing all three of those things at the same time. We're building out the platform. Anduril and General Atomics are building the platform. At the same time, through Project Venom, we're building out the autonomy. But at the same time, we have an experimental operation unit standing up to understand how we might want to actually not only employ them, but manage them. This is where I think the institution has to keep its mind open and not say, well, this looks sort of like something I already knew, so I'm going to treat it like and then we found ourselves trapped in the past. We have to keep our imaginations wide open to understand this is a game-changing technology that can really go to the next level when it comes to air dominance. But we can only do that if we don't sort of get trapped by the vestiges of the past.
You just released in April the AI Doctrine 25.1. 16-page document. The feedback I heard was that it's widely well received in general. I mean, it's a thin document, which is good because you want people to really understand what's in it for the Air Force. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the doctrine document and how do you see that vision?
You know, the most likely and most dangerous scenario is China, and that's something we keep our eye on. So, you know, maybe the first question is, with all of that, the geostrategic picture, the expanse of the Indo-Pacific, the threat of that China poses both to Taiwan and to the region, what key capabilities might you be looking at to transition from a legacy force to something that is more autonomous and kind of a hybrid force in the near term?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question, Paul. And yeah, you summed up the geopolitical situation pretty nicely. So as the Navy, as we've been looking at the problem and what we're learning from both current events and what the projected threat is potentially showing us, CNO Franchetti updated CNO Gilday's navigation plan. And in that navigation plan, it identifies 5 key capabilities and 4 key enablers. And those 5 capabilities are long-range fires, non-traditional sea denial, which fits in nicely with robotic and autonomous systems, counter C5ISRT, terminal defense, and contested logistics. And the 4 key enablers are live, virtual, and constructed training, so that our sailors can be even better trained for that potential high-end fight. The architecture, the naval operational architecture, sometimes called overmatch, right? Artificial intelligence, and then robotic and autonomous systems and how we integrate them. All of those we see as critical for maintaining that military advantage, and we've broken it up into kind of 2 time frames of near term, what can we do to improve the readiness of our force, and then over the longer term, how can we develop and maintain that enduring military advantage. The NAV plan and that 5+4, as we like to call it, nests very nicely underneath the joint warfighting concept. It nests very nicely under the interim national defense strategy. And the real question is how do you as N9 or as the Navy writ large do that prioritization and synchronization? And the way we're approaching that is what we call the warfighting integration cross-functional team, where we put together OpNav, the acquisition community, the fleet, and by extension, industry, so that we can look at the problem in a parallel by series manner. Right? And how we look at the capabilities, we look at those through a kill web analysis of the different mission areas. So how all of those critical capabilities and enablers contribute to that mission kill web, which then that integrated multi-domain effects to identify those gaps, and at sometimes those excess capacity that we may or may not have, right, to help inform that prioritization. Now, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say riding on top of all of that is ensuring that we modernize and maintain the Navy contribution to the strategic deterrent mission. And that is always one of our top priorities. And as the NAV plan states, that readiness becomes the next priority. And then these capabilities that come out of that 5+4, with capacity being our final priority. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Can you talk a little bit about that and where we are today and how things are going with one of the most important restructurings we've seen in the department?
Sure, thanks. I think just a little background. The tale of 3 commandants. The problem statement for force design, or the demand or the necessity for it, was first brought up by General Mellon when he said, look, we are not man-trained or equipped for the future fight. And General Berger came in and looked at the 2018 National Defense Strategy and said, General Nellen was right. We need to change, and not only do we need to change, we need to take a comprehensive look, man, train, equip, and then logistically at how we do business. And out of that came the design called Force Design 2030. We've since then dropped the 2030 part because we realized that it's a progression, it's a continuous cycle. So those were the first two commandants. You had the necessity, you had the design, and now you have General Smith, who is the implementer. And of those three things, I would tell you that the implementation part is probably the hardest. But the tenets of force design, the modernization, the gear, make sure we have what we need in order to fight the future fight. Talent management, let's make sure we have the right Marines with the right skill sets and keep them around longer. Training and education to get away from the static sort of brick and mortar approach and get into more live, virtual, and constructive to escape the physical delimitations of a training range or a classroom. And lastly, logistics. And I'll say we've probably taken an intellectual holiday to some extent on logistics. So let's talk about the implementation part here real quick. We have made structural, functional, and organizational changes to make parts of the force more distributed, to make them more adept at movement, maneuver, and sustainment with a smaller signature, to give them longer range fires, to give them exquisite sensing capabilities and more autonomous and robotic systems in order to see, sense, and understand the environment, be able to ingest that information and information from other sources and domains, rationalize it and use it for organic effects, or be able to offload it to the joint force in order for the joint force to either decide or bring effects to bear. So those changes that we have made are going apace. I would say that in a world of flat budgets, it's very, very difficult to modernize across those pillars at the pace that we want to modernize. But programmatically, we've shifted and will continue to move in that direction. Now, importantly, we didn't just take the directions, the blueprints, lay them down, and build the house blindly. Now, we have been going through a series of campaign of learning adjustments and refinements since 2019, right up until today. So we have shifted and adjusted, and will continue to do that as we go downrange. I think if I could say two things about how we realized the main of the original design, it would be to accelerate those changes and create a depth and a resilience to those changes. Depth of magazine that we touched on very briefly before we come in here. So going forward, the vector of force design, the changes in the main are exactly where we need to go. We will continue to reform and refine along the way beyond 2030.
I'd like to go back and get to some of the specific modernization capabilities you need, but before that, just before we leave the Force Design 2030 overall, or Force Design, what are we calling it then?
Force Design.
Okay, with no date. I wanted to go back to stand-in forces. If you could tell us a little bit about stand-in forces and the Marine, are they MLRs, Marine littoral units, right?
So we've generated two Marine littoral regiments, which are multi-domain formations that have the attributes that I mentioned earlier. They're smaller, they're able to be distributed, they have longer range fires, they have better precision. They have the ability to have to use organic ISR, autonomous systems, and exquisite sensing. Once again, to be that forward edge in the WES, if you will, in a contested space, and then rationalize the data that they collect, deliver it to organic systems to have the effect to hold targets at risk, offboard that into a joint fires network to enable better decisions to be made or better effectors to hit a target, for instance.
And do you feel that the lessons, the learning of lessons is taking place quickly? You mentioned that earlier in terms of you're seeing what works, what doesn't, that the force does have the agility to absorb what it needs, to learn a lesson, to do something differently. And do you have the capabilities that you need when you're discussing modernization needs and the innovative technologies? We're seeing so much here on the floor today. Are they getting into the force at the timing that you need?
And, intellectually, I think we are able to turn very quickly. This is the new problem or challenge that arises. Here is a way to approach that, and here's a solution set that we think we should bring to bear. Now, bring in the triumvirate. And I'm not talking about Crassus, Brutus, and Caesar. I'm talking about requirements, acquisition, and resourcing. Your ideas have to run through those three cycles, which at times can be very cumbersome, very serpentine, and very slow. So the mind and the solutions may come very quick, but when exposed to those three elements, it can slow down. Happily, I see Doug Beck out there in the audience. We have people and outfits that are less concerned with that and more concerned with bringing the ideas, making them real, scaling them, and getting in the hands of the operator. So there's a tension there.
Have you seen improvements over the past few years on that? I mean, you mentioned Doug. I can't actually see through the lights here, but Defense Innovation Unit, and there's been a big effort now, essentially, to use the authorities that the department has. It's not necessarily about new authorities. It's taking the risk and using what you have. Is that actually happening?
I think it's happening probably at increments and speeds that we're happy about but not satisfied. As a service, we need to continue to push on those and push the horizon further out in order to speed up and get the changes that we need on time. I will say, though, that the refinements of each of those three factors, there's got to be a portion of each one. You can't just target PPBE, for instance, and expect the requirement side and the acquisition side to follow along. Like you can't just go after JSIDs and expect PPBE and acquisition to follow along. There has to be refinements across the board in order to get a wholesale acceleration and meaningful refinement in time.
Is there technology out there that you wish you were getting faster, or are there things that you're seeing that you wish you could bring into the force? And do you have the people, the Marines in the force that can use that technology most effectively in terms of how you're recruiting and training and absorbing the technology?
I think from high-end capital investments, I think Admiral Pitts was up here talking about shipbuilding and how we need to go faster, we need to expand the industrial base, we need to be able to put ships in the water quicker, all the way down to the smaller, lower-end items that rely more on software, rely more on issues of advanced manufacturing. I think we have to look at all of that, and there's a balance across the board. But again, I think it's pushing on those three elements to get that acceleration to take place.
So clearly the military wasn't revealing any major developments when it comes to AI, but it's clear that AI is going to be a staple feature used in America's military branches. And I think there definitely seems to be a race to make this happen as soon as possible, because China says that they want to be AI weapon ready by next year, okay? So 2026. And when it comes to technology, and when it comes to China meeting deadlines, I think we can all, agree that China will get it done. So whether it was the Air Force talking or the National Guard or the Navy, they are very clear about they understand that the incorporation of AI needs to happen today, as soon as possible, whether that be with boats in the Navy or Air Force crafts. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that evolves. But I also thought it was interesting to hear how AI is helping boost military recruitment. So perhaps the better technology, the use of AI, cybernetics, which will be a huge feature in our military, where soldiers will have cybernetic enhancements in their bodies, on their eyes, their arms, whatever it may be, and also the use of exoskeletons, which help soldiers have more strength, have more limb function. I think it's clearly going to be helping more people who enter the military feel more secure about that decision and the risks that they're imposing on their lives and their families as well. But I just wanted to make a short video about this and just show you guys some things. And I'll probably will not attend another AI Expo unless it's a less biased situation. I really wanted to see some like counter, arguments there. I thought it was just going to be, I didn't know it was just going to be like a huge promotion of AI. I thought it was just going to be a mixture of different, companies, various fields of STEM, and even academics discussing the social changes with AI and other aspects of that. But my thoughts from all of this is that when AI is ready to take over, and let's all be real, that day will come, because AI has already infiltrated so many different fields and people's lives in different ways. And we've been seeing this steadily happen over the last, certainly I would say the last 5 years for sure. But when they want to take over, they will have access to every industry, whether it's food, cyber security, technology, finance systems, banking. They will have access to all of that. And even more terrifying is that they will have access to our military systems. And I think over the next 5 to 6 years, it's going to be the calm before the storm, before AI, really becomes sentient and starts to operate outside of its programming and how it can influence and affect our systems. And we're talking about, hacking our electrical grids, our, impacting our medical systems, our transportation systems, our airway traffic systems. AI will have the capability to infiltrate all of that without a human knowing. And the rate at which AI will be able to program and reprogram itself, I know that humans will not be able to keep up with it in the split second in which the AI is taking over and then creating, firewalls so to block out humans who are trying to override any program changes that an AI has made. So I think that's just the biggest fear. And I know we've seen that play out in movies and television shows, and it's all just fun, scary, thrilling fiction, but I think it's going to be a part of our future. But Sleepyheads, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Thank you to all of my recent viewers and subscribers. It's so exciting to see this channel growing after 3 years of being on YouTube and slowly but surely developing my rhythm and my style for how I like to do things, because me in the beginning of YouTube was super cringe, but I've come a long way, so I'm just really grateful for all of the recent growth and engagement that I've gotten. But Sleepyheads, I hope you have a great night, and thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.